I love, love, love. Hello interwebs and welcome back. I'm Shanna and this is where I share my life and stories and visions and opinions and whatever else I feel like. And today we are going to be talking about the different types of ESL teaching jobs in Japan. Now, one of the things I would like to point out before we get into the different types of jobs is that you can, at some of these jobs, work your way up into doing things like text development if that's something that you're more interested in. However, you do have to start from the ground and work your way up to that. Most companies are not going to hire you straight out for that. So if you're coming here to teach, come here with the mindset that you're going to be teaching. Hopefully this discussion can help you in deciding what is going to be the right type of English teaching job for you. So let's get into it. Number 1, Eikaiwas. So Eikaiwa literally means English conversation, and these are typically privately owned schools, though they're owned by a company, where you go in and you are teaching English to students either one-on-one or in small group settings, and it's students of all ages. Most Eikaiwas do not offer positions only for teaching adults or only for teaching kids. You're gonna have to be open to doing all of it. Class sizes and class demographics do vary greatly depending upon where you're living, the size of the school, the size of the community, etc. Typically, in bigger cities, you're probably going to see less kids and you're going to see more adults, and the more countryside you do get a lot more kids for students. At least that's what I've seen. This variation in demographics and class sizes also means that you are going to have a variation in different rules and regulations. Even if you're with the same company, things might be more relaxed if you are living somewhere that's a little more countryside, and a little more strict if you are living in the city. Working at an Eikaiwa, you don't typically have a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 type of schedule. Not only can your schedule vary week to week or month to month, but it can also vary hours-wise, day to day. Your holidays can also vary greatly, and you might not even end up with 2 consecutive holidays in a row. If that's something that you are really in dire need of, some places will allow you to ask for that, some won't, so keep that in mind. You also often end up working evenings, nights, sometimes split shifts, and you don't typically get national holidays off. And at the Eikaiwa I was working at, on national holidays, you ended up changing to a morning shift because a lot of business people who had those holidays off were wanting to come in for classes during the day. One of the nice things about this type of random schedule, I guess, is that a lot of these companies are willing to negotiate with you a little bit, and you're able to work out a schedule that works for you. Now, that doesn't always happen. It doesn't happen for everybody, especially if you are not flexible and you are not willing to work with them. But if you are, then hopefully you get lucky. You can make more money working at Eikaiwa than as an ALT. However, that's mostly because you can pick up overtime. So you can work as many hours as you want and make as much money as you want. When you are working Eikaiwa, you don't end up with as many holidays and vacations as an ALT. However, certain Eikaiwas do allow for everybody having off during things like Obon and Golden Week. Now, if you are working at an Eikaiwa and you are not getting all of these holidays and vacations that are set like an ALT, that means that you are either an employee and you get a set number of days that you can request off, or you are a contractor and you can request off certain days in exchange for doing overtime typically. This means that one of the great things is you do have more flexibility and control over your holidays, even if you're taking time off when it's unpaid. Another great thing is that typically these schools have everything already prepared for you. You don't have to do any kind of lesson planning, which means that your prep time is either 0 or extremely minimal, though this can vary sometimes depending on the school you're working for. When you're working at an Eikaiwa as a contractor, that means that you have to do your own taxes, which can be a little bit annoying and it can also be very intimidating. But I promise you, the process is actually fairly easy. And most places, if you don't understand what's going on, they will help you with it, which is very nice. And I don't mean your company, I mean like the tax office will help you. If that's something that you want some more detail about, let me know and I will do another video on that. I've also found that working as an Eikaiwa teacher, you can have a little bit more flexibility with where you want to live. Now, when you're first coming to Japan, typically a lot of them will place you somewhere, but if you are already here and you want to find your own apartment and you're like, hey, I'm moving to such and such place, they are typically willing to work with you and be like, okay, well, if you're a good employee, we still want you to work for us. Here's the schools that are available. You might have to commute a little bit more. And as long as that's okay with you, then that's great. As an Eikaiwa teacher, typically you do not need a car and you do not need to drive, but if you want to get your international license, you can. One of the great things about this job, especially if you didn't study Japanese before you came to Japan, or you don't know any Japanese, or your Japanese isn't very good, you don't need any Japanese to do the Eikaiwa job. Now, if you're in the countryside, sometimes you end up with staff who don't speak English, so that can be a little bit challenging, but they're usually very kind anyway, so it works out and everybody works together. But when you're at these Eikaiwa schools, you don't need any Japanese, which is nice. One of the downfalls of working Eikaiwa is that there are very few opportunities for growth and movement within these companies. Working Eikaiwa, you do end up with more opportunities to do things like text development or to get into sort of like managerial positions, but there's still not a lot of opportunity, I think. Next, let's talk about ALTs. If you are an ALT, you will end up teaching anything from elementary through high school. However, I've found that the majority of ALTs end up being elementary school or junior high school teachers. As an ALT, we have a couple different categories to talk about, and first we're going to talk about public school ALTs. If you are a public school ALT, you typically either work directly through the Board of Education or you work for a company that contracts you out to the different schools. If you work directly for the Board of Education, you make more money, you don't get as many holidays, but you do still get a lot. And if you work for a company, that company is completely in control over your schedule and what you do. So keep that in mind. Pay does range from company to company, with Jet having probably the highest salary of all of the ALT companies. There aren't many opportunities to do things like overtime to make extra money. However, you do end up with a Monday through Friday schedule, typically around like 8 to 4 or 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5, whatever the schedule might be. And then you also end up with a lot of holidays. Now, because these holidays are already scheduled for you, there's not any flexibility in them, but like I said, there's a lot of them, so you can kind of make it work usually. When you're an ALT, you have a little bit less flexibility over where you want to live, and you're also more likely to be put somewhere that's a little more inaka or countryside, because there's schools there and they need teachers, whereas Eikaiwa, if somewhere is like nacha inaka or like super countryside, you're not going to need Eikaiwa teachers out there because there's not as many people who are going to be taking Eikaiwa classes. Does that make sense? If you're an ALT, you are more likely to need to drive or need a car, but the great thing about that is a lot of the companies that you work for will provide those vehicles, at least partially. The amount of time and effort that's put into planning and preparation for your classes will vary greatly depending upon your school, your teachers that you're working with, what grades you're teaching, and also your individual teaching style. Some schools require a lot of preparation and a lot of effort. Some schools pretty much set everything up for you. Some schools, you are the main teacher. Some schools, the Japanese teacher is the main teacher. It varies a lot and from school to school, but I will say in general, ALT work is a lot more preparation and a lot more lesson planning than Eikaiwa. Many times, especially at elementary schools and especially in the countryside, teachers who are teaching English don't necessarily speak English. So that means that if you want your job to go smoothly, it is definitely helpful to know Japanese or at least be learning Japanese. I am very lucky because my school, my teachers who I worked directly with speak great English. There are also lots of other teachers at my school who speak some English, and I can get by with my minimal, terrible Japanese skills with them as well. So that's nice. But it's a little more difficult as an ALT if you don't know any Japanese. But it's not impossible either. I do know ALTs who've come here with zero Japanese and they've been thriving. Again, as an ALT, there's very little opportunity for growth or upward movement within your company. Sometimes managerial or head teacher positions do open up, but it's just very little opportunity. quick little side note, when you're an ALT, be prepared because many schools actually don't have air conditioning. So in summer, it gets really, really, really hot. You could also be a private school teacher. In my opinion, this is probably one of the best opportunities for teaching English in Japan. You end up with good pay, a good schedule, and if you plan on staying here for more than a year, it's just a lot better. However, some of the schools do have contract limits of from like 3 to 5 years, so after that you have to find a different job. But I mean, with at least my area as an ALT, we can only stay at the same school for 2 years, even though we can stay with the company for as long as they'll, re-sign your contract. If you are a private school teacher, you can teach anything from kindergarten through high school and university sometimes, and you can also end up teaching at an international school. When you're teaching as a private school teacher, you do typically have more control over what you're teaching and your content, but that also means that you have a lot more responsibility. A lot of these jobs to be a private school teacher have higher prerequisites, including things like master's degrees or TEFL qualifications, and many of them actually require that you are already in Japan when you apply, so application overseas is either impossible or very difficult. Another quick little side note, if you are interested in getting your TEFL certification, let me know and I can do a whole separate video on that as well. Private school jobs are a lot harder to find, and typically they are not advertised online, or at least on the big forums. So if being a private school teacher is something you're interested in, you're more likely to find it through things like networking, which is easier to do if you're already in Japan. When you are a private school teacher, there are more opportunities for growth and upward movement. However, if you do have a contract limit and you don't get tenured, you're kind of screwed there. You could also be a kindergarten or a preschool teacher. Usually these types of positions are not full-time positions, and you are often required to speak at least some Japanese because the teachers usually don't speak English. These jobs are advertised everywhere online. They're easy to find, pay is typically reasonable, but most of the time they do already want you to already be living in Japan. Many of these jobs don't, or simply can't sponsor a visa. So if that's something you need, this probably can't be your main job. They're great for people who are on a working holiday, have a spouse, and they want to make some extra money, or if you just have a second job or need a second job. They're great for that, but they're not typically people's full-time position. And the Mac Daddy, you could be a university teacher. Obviously, this is going to be one of the cream of the crop jobs, and you can even sometimes teach university classes as more of a side hustle. If you're teaching full-time though, benefits, pay, and time off are spectacular. This is obviously going to be a more difficult job to get with higher prerequisites and more competition. Something to note though is that apparently there is a high rate of turnover and a lot of uncertain contracts for teachers in these positions, however. This is also a job that you are less likely to see online and more likely to find posted in Japan or through networking. And finally, freelancing. So obviously if you're a freelancer, you're going to have a lot more flexibility with your schedule. You're going to have a lot more flexibility with what your income is, what you're charging. There are companies you can work through that will help you with this. There are websites where you can advertise your services. However, this is not something that you're going to get a visa on. So if a visa is something that you need, you're going to have to find a different job, and then you can just use freelancing as a side hustle. But you can make really good money freelancing. Now let's chat a little bit about my experience. So when I first came to Japan, I was working with a company called Nova, which is an Eikaiwa school. Now, I have met a lot of people with Nova who were placed in areas that were the location they asked for or were very close to the location they asked for. I, however, was not. I asked to be placed in Osaka, and I was placed in an area known as Hikone, which is in Shiga, and it's several hours away from Osaka. But do I regret it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am very grateful that I was put where I was because I met some of the most amazing people there. And I honestly think that starting off somewhere that's a little more inaka or countryside is the best way to do it. If you're coming to Japan because you want to learn about Japan, you want to experience the culture, you really want to be immersed into it, you're going to have more opportunities to do those things if you're living somewhere that's a little more countryside to start off with. And that's just my little bit of advice for you guys. When I started with Nova, my holidays were originally Tuesday and Wednesday, and I was lucky enough that later on that was changed to what I believe is the perfect schedule of Sunday and Monday. But that was because I was flexible with them. I was, always on time to work. I did a great job, and I was also willing to negotiate with them to get those particular days off. Also, I originally started off not having any kids classes, and I was teaching at a juku once a week, which was technically kids classes, but it was a little different. However, I very quickly had that change in my schedule and became one of the kind of go-to kids teachers. So if you are good with children, expect for something like that to happen if you're in an area that has a lot of children, and be prepared because when you sign up for these jobs, you come with the expectation that you're going to teach any grade, any level, any age. So don't be that teacher who comes in and is like, well, I hate children and I'm not going to teach the kids classes and you can have all of them, because that's just rude. Kids classes are pretty easy for the most part, but they can be exhausting if all you're doing is teaching kids classes all day. So help each other out. If that person loves kids classes and that's all they want to do, then great. But if there's somebody like me who needs a break sometimes, help a sister out, help a brother out, be there for each other. At least at Nova, you do get paid more for kids classes, and I was also in a unique position because I came in a little bit late, but I helped kind of start a special bilingual school. So my situation was a little different there. I was actually with the same students for several hours throughout the day, and we were practicing different subjects like science and math and history rather than doing like a typical kids lesson or Eikaiwa style lesson. I did, however, end up with classes that were up to 12 kids at a time by myself doing that, which when you have a lot of young kids running around, it's a lot. It's a lot. And that can happen at jukus too. The juku that I was at had up to 12 students at a time. And it's a lot, but it is doable. And another one of the little downfalls there was that, I don't know if it's still this way, but I ended up having to make and prepare a lot of the materials for my classes doing that. So it was a lot of preparation time compared to your normal Eikaiwa classes. I highly, highly, highly recommend learning how to say no if you're going to do this type of job, because you will be asked to do overtime, you will be asked to do extra things, you will be asked to stay late. These things happen. And if you constantly say yes, they will come to rely on you for that. And then you're going to end up working 6 days a week every week, or sometimes 7 days a week, or sometimes 14 days in a row, if not more. And if you want to do that, then go for it. But it is mentally exhausting. The job is not physically exhausting. It's very physically easy. But at least in my perspective, it can be very mentally exhausting, and you need that break and you need those days off. So learn to say no and put your mental health first. Also, don't expect a lot of support when you come into this position and you're moving to Japan. They will help set up housing for you, and that means turning on your gas and your electric and helping you with internet and things like that. But aside from that, you're kind of on your own. And I was even in a situation where when I first got here, despite confirming, I didn't have electricity at my apartment when we first got there. So that doesn't happen to everybody. It was kind of more of a me thing, but those things do happen, and you aren't given nearly as much support. If you guys go back a long time ago, I did a story time about moving to Japan and some of the things that happened when I first came here. If you want me to do a new video about that, I totally can, but yeah. That's it. While it's challenging not getting as much support, I promise you it's not impossible. If I can do it, you can do it too. For me, one of the most frustrating things about working at Nova was the kind of like bada schedule. Like, it was all over the place. Despite having a set schedule, things were constantly changing, and I also would work evenings one night, and then the morning the next day, and then the evening the next day, and then 2 mornings, and then an evening, or whatever. It was always back and forth. So it really messed with my sleep schedule, and I already have a lot of trouble sleeping. I'm already a very tired person and have trouble waking up. So going back and forth between night and then morning and then night and then morning and then commuting and not commuting, and it was a lot. It was a lot for me. Also, being in the contractor position at Nova, it was very frustrating that if you wanted to have time off, when you requested days off, you actually had to pay for those days off. So that was very frustrating. I've heard from some people that that's going to be changing. I don't know when that will be changing or exactly how that will be changing, but that was very frustrating to me as well. You could exchange overtime for those days off if you wanted to, but it didn't always work out. Overall, I think Nova is a great place to start when you are looking for jobs in Japan. They reimburse your flight cost, which is wonderful. They have really good bonuses. They overall are an easy job, and if you end up in a good place with other good employees, it can be really enjoyable. However, I don't think it's good for the long term. There's not a lot of movement within the company, like I said, not a lot of opportunity to necessarily make more money unless you're just doing overtime. So I don't think it's a long-term job, although there are people who have worked there for like 18 years. But yeah, it's a good place to start. Next, I started working for Interac, and I still currently work for Interac. One of the great things about Interac, if you are first moving to Japan, or even now when I need help, they are so helpful. Interac has ICs, which are basically independent contractors who are Japanese people who also speak English, and it's their job to help you with anything that you need help with. So if you need help, you email the company and you're like, hey, my bank is messed up and I can't figure it out and I don't speak enough Japanese, can somebody help me? They'll email you and they'll schedule an appointment with you and help you with that. They are so amazing and so helpful, and I really appreciate that. Now, because I started with Interac already living in Japan, I had a little bit more control over where I was living and where I wanted to go. If you are applying with Interac and you want to be in a specific place, you don't necessarily have that control when you are applying from overseas, so they do take your desires into consideration. I love the schedule for this job. The holidays, the vacations, the time off, the national holidays are awesome, as well as the fact that I have a consistent schedule. So while my sleep is still really shitty, I at least have a consistent schedule to it, which, you know, is helpful, right? However, the pay is pretty subpar, which is why I also have another job teaching English online. I am very lucky because I'm in a position where my school is wonderful. I love my school. I love the teachers that I work with. I love my students. Even though they're a little bit Yankee, I freaking love them. But not everybody gets in that position, and your experiences can vary greatly depending on what school you're at. I'm also in the position where I teach all of my classes. They have T1 and T2. T1 is the main teacher, T2 is the support teacher. I am T1 in all of my classes, and the Japanese teacher is there supporting me and helping me. And they are all just absolutely wonderful. I adore each of them to pieces, and I'm so lucky. However, being T1, that also means that I have a lot more preparation to do, and while they tell me, oh, I want to do unit blah 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 in the next class, it's my job to come up with what we're doing and keep it interesting and fun and make sure the kids are learning. Interac does provide lesson plans for some of the lessons. Honestly, they're terrible. Sorry to whoever made them. Sorry, Interac, if you decide to watch this. If you would like to change that and get some more interesting lesson plans, send me an email. I would love to help you guys out, but they're terrible. One of the bigger downfalls with Interac, other than the subpar pay, is that there is not a lot of growth within the company, or movement really. So there are sometimes managerial positions or head teacher positions that open up, but otherwise there's just not a lot of opportunity. Like once you're in a school and once you're the teacher, that's kind of what you're doing, at least for the next 2 years. So they can move you after 1 year, but you can stay in the same school for up to 2 years. It used to be 3, but recently it's been changed to 2, at least in my area. So that's kind of sad if you really like the school that you're at. Next, like I mentioned before, I also have another job teaching English online with VIPkid. It is one of the easiest jobs that I've ever had in my entire life. And VIPkid is one of the top paying schools. I really enjoy the job for the most part. I like that I can pick my schedule. I like that I can plan it how I want. They have all of the lesson plans already done, so I don't really have to do a lot of preparation if I'm already familiar with the majority of the lessons. And I have regular students, so that's great. However, I will say that doing that on top of a normal job is kind of exhausting, especially when we add in YouTube, but I love what I do and I love making videos, so I'm not at all complaining. I will leave below the link to my referral for VIPkid. If you guys want to apply and you have a bachelor's degree, you can check that out. If you have any questions about the application process or interview process or teaching anything, please let me know. You can ask me questions down below, or you can send me a message on Instagram or Twitter. However, if you decide to be a VIPkid teacher in Japan, just know that you cannot do this as your full-time job because you cannot get a visa sponsorship through them. So if a visa is something that you need, you're going to have to get it through another means. Now, I have had the opportunity to teach pre-K and kindergarten outside of Nova and with different people who either run different schools or contract with different schools. And this has not been a full-time or even part-time thing for me. It has been like, oh yeah, I'll come help out with this class, or yeah, I'll come teach this class because your teacher can't be there, or yeah, I'll work this special event. And it's been good money, and it's also very easy and very fun, and I really enjoy it. Definitely recommend doing that as like a little bit of a side hustle if you're here and you want to make some extra money. So it's great that we have a lot of options, but it also can be a little bit overwhelming. And I hope that the way that I broke this down, giving my experiences and some of the details of each of the positions, is helpful in helping you decide what type of position is going to be best for you when you come to Japan. Keep in mind that most of these contracts are for a year, which you can do anything for a year, and if you are not happy in your position at the end of that year, you can change it. You can find a different job, you could go to a different country, you can do whatever you want, but there are lots of options, and I think that they're good for different people and different personality types. So which one are you going to try? What are you most interested in? Do you have any other questions? And is there any other topic in particular you would like me to talk about when it comes to Japan or teaching in Japan, or anything that you need more clarification on? Because I kind of ramble and sometimes I don't make sense, I'm sure. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for this one. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And if you don't know what to comment down below, leave an apple emoji for teachers, because I don't know why apples are associated with teachers, but they are, and so that's what we're gonna leave. Not only does that help out my channel a lot, it lets me know that you were here, it gives us a chance to chat. I love to see your faces down there, and it lets me know you got to the end of the video. If you want another way to support my channel, down below there are links to my merch store, my website, and my Patreon. There's zero obligation to check any of those out, but if you want to, you can. I love and appreciate you all so very much, and I will see you next time. Bye! Oh, hello there. Yes, this is me casually drinking from my Genki AF merch because I don't have any bloopers to share. But if you like my cup or my shirt or some leggings or some socks, there's links in the description below. Be Genki and enjoy your coffee or tea or water or whatever else you like to drink from mugs.